May 26, 1942, Bir Hakeim, Libya. The desert was quiet that morning, too quiet for men who knew what waited beyond the horizon. Heat shimmered over the endless dunes, the air heavy with dust and diesel. Beneath a tattered French flag, a group of soldiers, many dark-skinned, their faces streaked with sand and sweat, tightened the straps on their helmets and loaded their rifles. They were the men of the Free French forces, but to the Germans advancing from the north, they were something else entirely: colonial troops, Africans, auxiliaries, disposable. But today, these men from Chad, Senegal, and Congo were about to remind the world what courage looked like when the rest of it had forgotten. Captain Jean Tuzit's voice cracked through the radio, echoing from a sandbagged command post. "Positions, the panzers are coming," the wireless hissed. A line of shadows rippled along the dunes, dust clouds rising like ghosts. Rommel's Africa Corps, tanks, armored cars, trucks full of infantry, an army built for lightning war. In the trenches, Sergeant Badio from Senegal pressed his cheek against the rough stock of his MAS-36 rifle. He could feel the vibration in the ground, the low, steady tremor of German engines. Around him, his comrades murmured prayers in French, Wolof, Lingala. Some kissed talismans tied around their necks, others just stared into the sun, waiting. For weeks, they had fortified this forgotten patch of desert, Bir Hakeim, nothing but a ruined fort and a few wells. Under General Marie-Pierre Koenig, the Free French 1st Brigade had turned it into a fortress of grit and stone, barbed wire, mines, hidden artillery, and at the heart of it all, African soldiers who had already fought from Chad to Libya, men who had crossed thousands of kilometers of burning desert to be here. The first shells landed just after noon, the earth convulsed. A tank round ripped through a trench, throwing sand and blood into the air. Mbaye ducked, coughing, ears ringing. "Hold your fire," a French lieutenant shouted. Dust swallowed the horizon. Then came the staccato hum of machine guns. The German assault had begun. The defenders answered with everything they had. 75mm field guns thundered. Anti-tank rifles spat flame. The smell of cordite filled the trenches. One by one, German armored cars burst into flame, their black smoke twisting into the desert sky. Still they came, waves of gray uniforms and steel. From the ridge, Koenig watched through binoculars, his jaw tightened. "They're testing the line," he said to his adjutant. "They think we'll break, but the Africans didn't break." Corporal Kawasi from the Congo fired until his barrel glowed red. When his rifle jammed, he grabbed a grenade, pulled the pin with his teeth, and hurled it into the path of a German half-track. The explosion sent metal fragments tearing through the vehicle. He laughed, a sharp, defiant sound swallowed by the roar of battle. By sunset, the ground around Bir Hakeim was littered with burnt-out panzers and bodies half buried in sand. The men were exhausted, parched, but still alive. They had repelled Rommel's first attack. That night, the desert turned cold. Fires flickered along the trenches as the wounded moaned softly. Somewhere in the dark, a soldier began to hum a song from Dakar. Others joined in, voices trembling but proud. Koenig walked among them, his boots crunching over shell casings. "You've done France proud," he said quietly to a group of Chadian soldiers sitting by a mortar. One of them, Private Dogo, looked up and replied, "Tonight, General, Africa fights for its honor too." Koenig nodded. He knew they all understood what was at stake. If Bir Hakeim fell, the British 8th Army's flank would be exposed. The road to Egypt, to the Suez, to the heart of the Allied campaign, would be open. But for now, in this lonely fortress carved into the Libyan sands, the men held their ground. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. Yet when the wind carried the echoes of Rommel's engines again the next morning, none of them flinched. Bir Hakeim would not fall quietly. May 28, 1942, 2 days later, the desert had changed color. The pale sand was now streaked black from smoke and oil, dotted with twisted metal and the broken silhouettes of German tanks. Bir Hakeim looked like the surface of another planet, scorched, cratered, alive only with the rumble of distant engines and the low drone of circling Stukas. From the command dugout, General Koenig studied a map lit by a flickering lantern. His adjutant leaned in close, his face streaked with grime. "They're surrounding us, sir." "We're cut off from El Adam." Koenig exhaled through his nose, slow and steady. "Then we fight where we stand, outside, the men were already bracing for the next assault. Chadian soldiers dragged ammunition crates through the trenches, their hands blistered and raw. Senegalese machine gunners checked belts of cartridges, feeding them into their Hotchkiss guns. Every man knew what was coming: Rommel's second strike. At dawn, the sky filled with a mechanical scream: German dive bombers. Stukas peeled down from the heavens, sunlight glinting off their wings. The sirens wailed, that terrible, shrieking sound designed to crush morale. The earth erupted, sand and shrapnel rained down like a storm. Private Issa Ba, barely 19, threw himself into a crater beside Sergeant Mbaye. The ground shuddered with every impact. "They're softening us for the tanks," Mbaye shouted over the noise. Ba nodded, clutching his rifle to his chest like a lifeline. When the bombing stopped, there was only silence, heavy, ringing, unnatural. Then the tanks came. Dozens of panzers rolled forward, flanked by half-tracks and infantry. The desert trembled under their weight. The defenders waited until the first line crossed the minefield, a distant click. Then a chain of explosions ripped through the sand, brilliant flashes of light, smoke curling into the wind. German vehicles flew into the air, wheels spinning. Fire! Mbaye's order was drowned by the thunder of guns. The French 75s roared again, spitting fire into the oncoming line. Each shot punched through the desert haze, striking metal with devastating precision. The Africans worked like clockwork: load, fire, reload, their movements disciplined but fueled by rage. A Chadian anti-tank crew manned a captured German 50mm gun. Every recoil slammed into their shoulders, every hit drew a cheer. They were defending not just a fort, but an idea that courage didn't wear a single color. By midday, the heat was unbearable, canteens were nearly empty, and the air smelled of fuel and death. Mbaye crawled from one trench to another, checking on his men. He found Kouassi lying beside a destroyed machine gun, his hands blackened from burns. "They keep coming," Kouassi rasped. Mbaye knelt beside him. "Then we keep fighting." The Germans did keep coming. Over and over, for every attack repelled, another followed. By the third day, Koenig's position was completely encircled. The radio crackled with faint voices, British command urging him to hold out just a little longer. Supplies were running low. The wounded filled every corner of the fortress, but morale held. Each night, when the gunfire ceased, the men gathered quietly under the starlit sky. They shared stories of rivers back home, of families waiting oceans away. Private Boss spoke of his mother's cooking. Mbaye told them of the first time he saw the sea. For a moment, the war faded, replaced by memories that made them feel human again. Koenig made his rounds, silent and steady. To the African troops, his presence was a kind of promise that France had not forgotten them. "General," one soldier called out, his voice hoarse, "will Paris hear about us?" Koenig paused. "If Paris still stands," he said softly, "they'll hear everything." That night, a sandstorm swept across Bir Hakeim. The desert roared, erasing sound and sight. Yet through the howling wind, the defenders could still hear engines, more tanks, more trucks. The siege wasn't over, it was only tightening. As dawn broke on the fourth day, Mbaye stared out across the dunes. The horizon flickered with flashes of light, artillery fire. He adjusted his helmet, wiped sand from his face, and whispered a quiet prayer. Somewhere in the chaos, a voice rose from the trenches: "Bir Hakeim will not fall." And it didn't, not yet. June 5, 1942. The siege had stretched into its 10th day. The wells had gone dry, the rations were gone. Men were drinking from jerry cans of radiator water just to keep breathing. Yet somehow, the defenders of Bir Hakeim still stood. At dawn, the sky turned white with dust as the Afrika Korps launched its final assault. Stukas screamed overhead, dropping bombs in perfect formation. The desert shook like thunder, trenches collapsed. Men disappeared under the sand. Still, the guns fired. Still, the African soldiers refused to abandon their posts. Inside a shattered command post, General Koenig hunched over his radio. The voice from British command crackled through: "We can't reach you anymore. If you can, break out tonight." He looked up at his officers, eyes bloodshot but sharp. "We hold until darkness," he said, "then we move." Outside, Sergeant Mbaye crawled through a trench lined with the bodies of his friends. He had lost count of the hours, of the attacks, of how many times he'd reloaded his rifle. Every muscle ached, every breath burned. Yet when he saw Private Ba clutching his side, bleeding badly, he knelt and tore a strip from his sleeve to stop the bleeding. "You'll see home again," Mbe whispered. Ba smiled faintly. "Then tell my mother I did not run." By noon, the Germans were only a few hundred meters from the inner defenses. Koenig's headquarters was under direct fire. A mortar shell exploded near the entrance, throwing dust and debris inside. One of Koenig's aides shouted over the noise, "General, we can't hold them much longer." Koenig didn't answer. He looked out at the burning desert, a vision of hell, and knew what he had to do. He gathered his men. French, African, legionnaires, a patchwork army bound by desperation and honor. "Tonight," he told them, "we break the circle. We march through their lines. No one stays behind." His eyes landed on the African companies. "You fought like lions. France will remember your courage." "I swear it." Night fell like a curtain. The moon hung low and blood-red. The men stripped their gear to the essentials, rifles, bayonets, a few grenades each. Silence fell over the fortress. The only sound was the wind. Then, at Koenig's signal, they moved. Hundreds of men crept out into the darkness, crawling between shell craters and wrecked tanks. The Germans had no idea the defenders were slipping through their own lines. But luck never lasts long in war. A flare burst above them, lighting the desert in harsh white. Gunfire erupted instantly. Tracer rounds sliced through the night. Men fell silently into the sand. Mbe grabbed Ba under the arm, dragging him forward as bullets kicked up dust around them. "Keep moving," someone shouted. A truck burst into flames nearby, lighting their path like a torch of death. Koenig's convoy pushed through, headlights off, engines roaring only when they had to. The desert was chaos, a shouting, explosions, flashes of light. Yet somehow, by dawn, hundreds had made it through. Behind him, African soldiers stood at attention, their faces hardened by fire and sand. The news spread like wildfire. London, Cairo, Brazzaville, the world heard of the stand at Bir Hakeim. The Free French had held Rommel for 16 days, giving the British time to regroup. But beneath the headlines and speeches, the truth was simpler. It was the Africans who made it possible. The men from Chad, Senegal, and Congo who refused to yield, who bled in a land not their own so that others could live free. Weeks later, as the wounded were tended to in makeshift hospitals, Mbe lay under a canvas tent, his arm in a sling. Koenig came to see him. "You did more than anyone expected," the general said. Mbe smiled faintly. "We only did what soldiers do, sir. We held the line." Koenig nodded. "No, Sergeant, you did what heroes do." Outside, the wind swept over the desert, erasing the footprints and scars of war. But Bir Hakeim would not vanish. It had entered history, not as a French victory, but as proof that bravery knows no race, no rank, no border. And somewhere, carried by the wind, came a familiar sound, the hum of a song in Wolof, rising softly over the sands, where men had once stood together against the impossible. If you want more untold stories of African soldiers who changed the course of history, subscribe and stay with us. These are the voices the world forgot until now.